If you choose to visit the DC area, one of the big sites to see is Arlington Cemetery. It's open to the public at the discretion of the Army, as it's a military burial ground. There are 4 tombs and 3 bodies that comprise the tombs of the unknown soldiers at Arlington, at least the ones with the changing of the guard. These 4 burial places are guarded 24/7, have been since 1938. One of the rarest awards in the military is that of TGIB, Tomb Guard Identification Badge, for those who have passed the Sentinel training and served at least 9 months on the mat. There have only been about 700 awarded since the late 1950s, when the award was introduced. Arlington was not always a cemetery. The land was originally a plantation in the Custis family. When the Civil War broke out, then current residents Mary Anna Custis Lee and her husband Robert left in the spring of 1861. Robert, after all, had accepted a position commanding troops in the Confederate Army and had to muster down in Richmond. 3 days later, the property was taken over by U.S. troops. A few years into the war, they started using the property as a pauper's cemetery, in addition to a strategic vantage point. And that, eventually, leads us to 1866, and the lesser-known Tomb of the Unknowns in Arlington. Buried right by the mansion, laid to rest 18 months after the war ended, there is a mass grave containing 2,111 unidentified bodies from the 2 battles of Manassas. We don't know who these people are, nor what their stories might be, nor even what side they were fighting on. We don't even know if some of the bodies are complete. But we do know that some still haunt the battlefield on which they died. This is Dreary Midnight, and we're talking about Manassas ghost stories. Let's get into it. Intro music!
Intro music!
Also, my name is Lisa. My pronouns are she, they.
My name is Celeste. My pronouns are... I can't believe how awesome that intro was. No, it's she, her. But also, I love that intro.
Thanks.
I love when we do cool intros.
And I wrote that up in like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, just trying to
It's peak season, and we were literally just...
Yeah, like we were like
right before this.
Like, I don't know, usually we come in fully researched, and Celeste was like, can we just... I said.
Well, because I was going to get here, because I just came from work. I was going to get here early, and then Lisa was like, I'm still working on my stuff. And I was like, I also have to work on my stuff. Let's work on our stuff before we record.
I had not necessarily committed to this topic until today. So, so again, it's peak season. We're a little loopy. And
I'm so tired, dude.
But yeah. So if we're a little bit loopy, and if editing Lisa is interjecting more than they often do, that's why.
That's fair.
What do you know about the 2 battles of Manassas?
Nothing.
Also known as the battles of Bull Run.
I should know things because I remember learning about them. But if you put a gun to my head and asked me, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
History was not my strong suit.
Yeah. It kind of has to be, given my profession, but that's also how I know so much about Arlington Cemetery, and that's why I decided to do that intro that way.
That's why I like touring. That's why I liked touring, because I feel like it's more tangible when you can like see it versus just reading about it in a textbook.
Yeah.
And also, you get it in like bite-sized chunks. You don't get like the history of the world in 4 months.
Yeah.
So, I actually know a lot now about like Alexandria history just based on the tours.
Yeah.
But if I had like read about it,
it's like a guy walked to a place, did a thing,
I would not have remembered any of it.
Yeah. I mean, that's also what I like about my job, is that like I thrive on the drama. And
Seriously,
if I don't know about the drama, that it doesn't feel as real.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned this on a Patreon cast as well, where it's like I didn't necessarily know the full story about the statue of David. And so my first thought was that our penis is supposed to look like that. Because I didn't know the drama. And so here's another marble naked guy. We just passed like 7 of those.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's why my big ethos in studying history is
What is the drama with David's dingling?
The drama's not with David's dingling.
Okay.
The drama is that Michelangelo was like the 3rd artist to work on that. He takes on the project when he's like 26, and the first 2 guys it was a terrible piece of marble to begin with. The first 2 guys had already started to carve into it a little bit. It was originally not meant to be an indoor thing. It was meant to be outside and looking down. And so that's what Michelangelo was commissioned to finish up. And so it's this like 30 or 40 year saga of trying to get everything just right.
Mm-hmm.
And
proportion wise.
I don't know if it starts or if it's just an early example of kind of a dynamic pose where it's obvious he's leaning weight on one side and looking a different way. Plus also it's super, super detailed, especially to scale. It's like 15 feet tall.
Yeah.
But we're not here to talk about Italian sculptors.
Although I do love that.
Yeah. So 2 battles of Bull Run, or battles of Manassas, depending on where you grew up. For a long time growing up in Virginia, except Northern Virginia.
That's fair. Different distinction.
Yeah.
Differentiation.
Taught as a sort of Bull Run versus Manassas, depending on Union or Confederacy.
I learned it as Bull Run.
Yeah.
And I'm from the West Coast.
Okay. For a while, I thought it was 2 different, like first and second Bull Run were different from first and second Manassas. I thought that for a long time. First battle was July of 1861. The war was only a few months old at that point. The attack on Fort Sumter in April of 1861 is considered the first battle of the Civil War, though states had started seceding in December of 1860. Richmond had only just become the capital of the Confederacy. West Virginia had become a thing for like a month. A lot of people at the time were thinking it was going to be a 90-day war, if that. It was not.
Yeah,
the war goes on until
obviously.
1865. Yeah, so commanders for the Union are Irvin McDowell. Commanders for the Confederacy are Joseph E. Johnson and P.G.T. Beauregard. Approximately 61,000 forces engaged and estimated around 4,800, 4,900 casualties, including injuries.
Jesus.
It was a Confederate victory. Confederate president showed up. That's the brief summary of first battle.
Got it.
Second battle, also briefest of summaries. It was the end of August of 1862. 125,000 forces engaged. Estimated 21,800 casualties, including wounded. Another Confederate victory. It's Robert E. Lee for the Confederacy, Major General John Pope for the Union. He was fired because of this defeat. Antietam, which is considered the bloodiest single day in the Civil War, is almost 23,000 casualties and included wounded, and that's like 2 weeks later. Sort of in the wake of Pope's firing and the pursuit therein. So
that's so many people.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I didn't even realize how many people were living in America at that time. I mean, that makes sense. They'd been here for a while, but like it's a lot.
Yeah,
of death.
It's a lot, and so when we say like 22,700 casualties, that includes like wounded and missing.
That's true. Not just dying.
Yeah,
but
so like 22,000 at Second Battle of Bull Run. Technically, of those, there's only like 4,000 or 5,000, I think, who actively died.
Still a lot of people.
But a lot of trauma due to wartime also means there's a lot of haunting.
Which sucks as a ghost. Imagine having to haunt the place that's
where the worst thing ever happened.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So this was a Reddit comment commenting on somebody who was writing about Gettysburg.
Ooh.
But this person says, August 25th, 9 p.m., Fairfax Station, Virginia. I believe I heard a phantom ghost train whistle in or near my yard. I've lived in my home for 13 years, and I've never heard something so loud so close to my home. Mm-hmm. On rare occasion over the years, I've heard a very distant train whistle from what I assume would be the VRE or Amtrak trains, but nothing as loud as what I heard that night. My husband happened to be walking the dog in the backyard at the time, and I was already in bed. When he came inside, he said the hair on his arms was standing on end, and that the whistle sounded like a train was in the backyard. I'm wondering if anyone else has ever experienced something like this. I've since done a little research and wondered if our experience had something to do with something paranormal, or residual energy imprinted on the environment. I've learned that Fairfax Station was originally a station of the Orange and Alexandria Railroad. It was known as Lee's Station during its first year. During the Civil War, August 1862, Clara Barton tended to the wounded Union and Confederate troops at the station after the Second Battle of Bull Run, with headquarters at nearby St. Mary's Church, very close to our home. That's where the Red Cross started as well.
Oh,
so the
my
name
gosh.
Clara Barton rings a bell. She was sometimes called the Angel of the Battlefield.
Well, I know Clara Barton
Yeah.
Parkway that I drove down yesterday.
Yeah. But yeah, that's named after her.
Got it.
There's one of the...
That's freaky, by the
Yeah.
way. Hearing a train whistle in your backyard.
Yeah, and especially because of its connection to... This next one I'm going to talk about is from the Big Book of Virginia Ghost Stories by L.B. Taylor Jr. This is from page 66, The Haunted Stone House. Of all the sites across Manassas National Battlefield Park in Northern Virginia, certainly one of the most haunted is an old structure known as the Stone House. Here, of course, 2 great battles of the Civil War were fought at Bull Run.
Hate when something is just described as the blank house.
Yeah, the Stone House, the White House, get creative, call it the
It's just
President's Mansion like a normal person.
It just, when something is just like, oh, the blank blank, it's colloquially known as something. I'm just like, that's got some history. That's got some history there.
Yeah. Here, of course, 2 great battles of the Civil War were fought at Bull Run. This house is one of only 2 original buildings still on the grounds. It is believed to have been built in 1828, and it served as a tavern at the crossroads for the cattlemen and wagon teamsters coming down the Warrenton Pike from the west with supplies for Alexandria and Washington. It was never a fancy hotel noted for fine food, sold hard liquor to hard men. Its success was short-lived, however, as railroads in the 1850s replaced wagons as the principal means of transportation. As the Turnpike era ended, the house and its owners seemed to slip into obscurity.
Oh, yeah. People didn't have to stop anymore.
Yeah, or at least not stop there, because many times taverns will have contracts with stagecoach companies, because taverns, at least in Virginia, are legally required to provide a place to sleep. And so if you're going by stagecoach, which is just sort of like taking the Greyhound bus, like they stop for the night at specific taverns.
Got it.
And so if I were going west, for example, you could pick up a stagecoach from Alexandria, stop over in Manassas, stop over another day's ride out. Because from where we are now in Alexandria, at the turn of the 19th century, the trip out to Manassas would take about a day.
Oh, that's cool though that they set up a system to make sure people could travel efficiently.
Yeah. So back to L.B. Taylor. Nearly 20,000 men fell during the Second Battle of Manassas. Surgeons worked around the clock, but haste and neglect were unavoidable. Many suffered for days on the field without any attention. Consider the following testimony of Dr. J.M. Humiston, surgeon of the Brooklyn Regiment captured at Bull Run. He said that when he, quote, solicited permission to remain in the field and to attend to wounded men, some of whom were in a helpless and painful condition and suffering for water, he was brutally refused.
Oh.
He described the sufferings of the wounded as, quote, inconceivably horrible with bad food, no covering, and no water. They were lying upon the floor as thickly as they could be laid. There was not a particle of light in the house to enable us to move among them.
Oh. See, that's the thing, too, is like, yeah, maybe some of them were injured, but the way that they were treated after the injuries, like, those likely led to death as well.
Yes.
I mean, if you get your arm torn off or something, you can get infections so easily.
Yeah. And the treatment of the bodies afterwards was also really, really bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Taylor has an entire paragraph about what happens to bodies afterwards that I don't almost have the stomach for, so I'm not going to read it.
I want to read it after we're done recording.
Yeah. Is it any wonder, he goes on to say, that Jim Burgess, curator of the National Battlefield Park, after saying a number of soldiers undoubtedly died in the stone house, added, quote, "It has every right to be haunted," unquote. Burgess related that the haunting aura about the house was first documented in the book Four Brothers in Blue by Robert Goldthwait Carter. A chapter in the book is devoted to the author's visit to the battlefield in the early 1900s. During his visit, he stayed at the stone house as a guest of the owner, Henry Ayres. Burgess admitted that several curious incidents in recent years lend support to the claims of it being haunted. One was reported in the 1970s. Quote, "A park ranger and a volunteer were closing up the house one day," recounts Burgess. "It was after 5 p.m., late in the season, and it was getting dark. The normal procedure is to bolt the doors from the inside, set the alarm, and then go out by way of the basement. This they did, but as they were about to exit, they both heard distinct footsteps from the room above.
Uh-oh.
But the steps went from the big tavern room into the hallway and then into a smaller room. Thinking they somehow must have missed a lingering visitor, they both went upstairs to look. Now, there are virtually no places to hide. There are no closets, for example. They looked everywhere, but found no one. At that point, they got very nervous and left the place abruptly." More recently, according to Burgess, a seasonal park ranger was on duty alone in the house on a slow summer afternoon. This employee began to nod off to sleep while reading a book as he sat just inside the front door. Suddenly, someone or something knocked his glasses off, and he was jarred wide awake. He checked all around the house, but soon discovered he was still alone. A few years ago, when the stone house had period furnishings, Park Service Administrative Officer Jane Becker, a camera bug, went to take some photos of the interior rooms after the house had closed to the public for the day. She was alone. She used a 35mm camera. When the color photos were developed, all came out well, except for one picture that totally puzzled her. On this single print was a large, fuzzy white blotch that ran across the center of the photo from top to bottom. Part of the blotch was thick, like a dense cloud, obliterating the furniture beyond it.
Oh.
Yet part of the wispy material was partially transparent. Becker looked at her negatives. All were fine except for this one. She consulted photographic experts. No one could explain the phenomenon. There was no rational cause for the apparitional appearance. But one of the other weird happenings...
Jesus. I mean, that wasn't weird enough.
So, Taylor goes on to say, in January 1986, I received the following letter from Kathleen Louisa, who then lived in Falls Church, Virginia.
Hey.
I had traveled down Route 29 through Manassas and on westward many, many times. I love the battlefields, and the stone house has been a favorite landmark for me at the intersection of 29 and Sudley Road. Many times as I waited for the traffic light there, I gazed at the house and wondered about its stories and if it could talk.
Oof.
One night in 1986, I suggest we all go for a drive out to the battlefield to see if we could see Halley's Comet. My mom, her mother and father, and I got in the car and set out. As we approached the intersection, I was looking into the darkness for my landmark, the stone house, so I could make the right turn onto Sudley Road and into the little parking area. I drove right through the intersection. There was no house.
What?
Puzzled, I turned around and went back. We got back to the intersection and sat at the light, looking aghast at the empty lot where the stone house should have stood. The rise of land was empty, except the well or cistern that stands in front, and the fences were still there. We were very upset, figuring some land development scheme had led to its being torn down, or maybe there was some move by the Park Service to relocate it. As we drove by looking at this, I do not remember seeing any foundation walls, hole in the ground, or signs of rubble. Just an empty lot and the well. Finally, we left, shaking our heads sadly. Imagine my utter shock when, 2 weeks later, we drove down 29 during the day, dreading the spot where my old friend used to stand, and the house was still there.
What?
We sat at the light staring with our mouths open. I immediately asked my mom and grandparents to verify that they really had seen a vacant lot that night. They all swore they had. I know we were not at the wrong location. I know the area too well for that.
That's so freaking creepy, dude.
And so that was January of 1986. November of 97, Taylor gets another letter. And this person says, I experienced a ghostly encounter of sorts January of 97. So 10 months before the letter lands on Taylor's desk. But I didn't know about it until I read about the lady who said she drove by the location of the stone house and it had disappeared. The same thing happened to me. I was living in Manassas at the time and wanted to take a drive one night. It was clear with the moon out. It was not pitch dark. I was alone. Having lived in the area 20 years, I know exactly where the stone house is. In fact, I took a tour there a couple of years ago, yet on this night it was gone. I even turned the car around and said to myself, that's funny, I'm sure I'm at the right intersection. And all I saw was a patch of grass with the glow of the moon on it where the house had been.
Oh my god.
And you can't miss this house. It's close to the road, so I can personally vouch for what the other woman saw, or rather what she didn't see.
You know what's so weird about that is that they'll say, "Oh, the house isn't there." They'll turn around, they'll have a conversation, they'll drive, and it's still not there. It's not like like hallucination. Like it's not like a quick like, "Oh, I thought it wasn't there," and then it's there again.
Yeah.
It
wasn't
a
like
sustained amount of time that they definitely did not see it.
Yeah, and especially with that first one where she calls up everybody else in the car and was like, did I like sincerely miss that intersection earlier, or was the landmark actually not there? And they're like, no, the landmark wasn't actually there. All right, so another series of stories are from Mark Nesbitt, who wrote the Ghosts of Gettysburg series. There's a ton of them at this point. Part of the reason I brought up the train-related one earlier is because during the war, there was an unfinished railroad bed. So that was kind of maybe there's actually something to this.
Yeah.
But he also mentions the stone house, specifically that at least 2 wounded men from the 5th New York Infantry left their names carved in the woodwork of the house. Private Charles E. Brem was 21. Eugene P. Gear was 17. Brem survived the battle. Gear did not. Nesbitt goes on to say that David Roth in Blue and Gray magazine's Guide to Haunted Places of the Civil War wrote in 1986 about the negative energy in the house that is felt by many. Visitors sometimes feel a distinct pressure from the invisible hands pushing them down the stairs from the 2nd floor. In July of 94, that would also be a terrifying thing. In July of 94, I received a letter.
1 year after I was born.
I was 3 months old.
I was July of 93, baby.
All right. So in July of 94, I received a letter from a gentleman who wrote of his experience with pushy ghosts at the stone house. He mentioned he had heard about the house's history as a tavern with heavy drinkers and altercations. Though the day was hot, walking through the house he suddenly passed through one of those inexplicable cold spots. Just as he was leaving the house, he was hit hard from behind and fell out of the house to the ground, injuring his knee. In physical pain, he was also unnerved. Coming out of the house, he heard laughter, as if a group of people were gloating over his being thrown out. He turned to ask for help, only to find that no one was inside or outside the house. He was alone.
I'm shaking my head because I realize the audience can't see it. I don't like that.
All right. And he gets into a little extra history before. This requires fashion history groundwork, and this is one that we're going to leave off on. For a little history background, in the mid-19th century, anything and everything French was popular in America, from women's garments to military tactics. The common kepi headgear used on both sides was a French design. Napoleonic tactics were the basis for army maneuver. Captain Mini of the French army improved the shoulder arms projectile, the famous mini ball, to fire farther and more accurately than its predecessor, much to the dismay of those struck by it. Some military units took the fashion statement to extremes and outfitted themselves, head to toe, with the uniform of the French forces in North Africa, known as the Zouaves. With a Middle Eastern influence, the uniforms feature ballooning pantaloons tucked into gaiters, short waist-length jackets with looping embroidery, waistbands that were yards long, and, to complete the outfit in the most impractical way, turbaned fezzes replete with tassels swinging from the top.
That is a very distinct look.
Yeah. The unintended consequence was that the worst part was that the uniforms were brightly colored. Red sashes or jackets, yellow piping, bright blue striped pantaloons, making them the perfect targets when fighting in the woods and fields in America. But this allows for a lot of specific sightings. You can't mistake it for anything else. Some have claimed to see the ghost of a Zouave near the New York monument, close to the site of their near annihilation. But the Zouave I had always heard about had been seen near the unfinished railroad. Perhaps there are two, because the one I'd heard of is very conspicuously missing his head.
Oh, I got chills.
Yeah.
I don't like how many of these have to do with railroads. I live in a railroad city now.
Yeah.
And I'm going to hear the train. I'm going to be like, is it a ghost?
Yeah. I went to college in a train town, and I think the local horror story was that apparently one of the professors haunted the tracks.
You told that story.
Yeah, because he was deaf and the train was early, and he had the train schedule memorized. I'll leave Mark Nesbitt's blog linked below.
Yeah, it sounds really intriguing.
But with all of that said,
this was so fun.
Yeah.
I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna be spooked out now.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You'll be fully awake for your drive home later today. but have you been out to Manassas?
We should go see the stone house.
We should.
It's right
Road
there.
trip.
Falls Church.
Yeah.
It's like right there.
Yeah, it's like 45 minutes from where I live right now. If you want to hear that on Patreon, if and when we eventually do that, Dreary Midnight Podcast, we're at patreon.com/drearymidnightpod. If you have a spooky encounter at a Civil War battlefield, we'd love to hear about it.
Yes. There's so many around here.
Yeah, drearymidnightpodcast@gmail.com is the best place to say.
Please send any spooky stories you have.
Yes.
I'm craving real listeners' spooky stories.
Yes. Would love to do a real listener stories at some point soon. And if you want to follow us on socials, we are on Instagram at drearymidnightpod. Yes. And we're on YouTube now as well. And with all of that said, watch where you're driving. And don't doubt yourself if you think your usual landmarks have vanished. And safe travels home on this dreary midnight. Good night.
Good night.